Hi there, Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. It's a podcast about tuning into life, tuning into the laws that apply to all of us so that we can evolve as individuals and collectively, if you're into that kind of thing. This ultimately means that we put ourselves on a path towards wholeness and acceptance, and that we use our creativity as a vehicle for doing that, because creativity, it turns out, can allow us to make the unconscious conscious. So any blocks that we do have to flowing with life in that way can be dealt with, dissolved, and we can keep moving forward. Today's interview is a really cool one, in my opinion. I know I always end up saying that, and it's often true, but it's 100 million% true today. This is an awesome conversation with Nikita Thakrar from journeywithnikita.com. Nikita is a yoga teacher and NLP master. And ultimately, this conversation is about the idea of Dharma, or life purpose, or acceptance of universal laws. Nikita gives some amazing definitions to help you understand this concept in the conversation, but it covers all kinds of really important and really life-enhancing topics that can help you to just get into a deeper sense of acceptance of who you are and what your fate or destiny or purpose is here on planet Earth. We go into some of the philosophical issues around those topics, but ultimately it's just a very practical conversation about purpose. So Nikita, thank you so much for this. Dharma is a really interesting concept that I'm just so happy that you helped me to explore and learn more about. Everybody else, hope this helps you to grow more real. Here we go. Thanks a bunch. Boom. Oh, hi there, Nikita. Thank you for joining me today on today's episode of Creative Status. We're going to be talking about some of my favorite topics because you're a yoga teacher and amongst other things. And I'm very obsessed with yoga and yoga philosophy, but you actually know something about it. So I think we're going to dive into it. Before we do you feel like introducing yourself, telling people what you're all about and what you do, and also what you want to get out of this conversation?
Yeah, namaste. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm Nikita. I'm a yoga teacher, a meditation facilitator, and a reiki healer. And in recent years, I've been incorporating all of these modalities together along with neuro-linguistic programming. And I've always had a fascination for the word Dharma. In fact, I would say it's my favorite word. I just light up when I hear it. And what I'm hoping to gain from today's conversation is to really explore the depth of that word.
That's awesome. So Dharma, I think it's one of these words that a lot of people have kind of heard, like here and there. It pops up on social media or in different videos on YouTube or whatever it is, but nobody really knows what it means. That's the kind of impression that I get, unless I'm just projecting, because I was one of those people. The first time I heard the word Dharma was in a book by Jack Kerouac. It's called The Dharma Bums. But even after reading that book, I didn't really know what the word meant. So maybe we just get right into it about defining it. Like, what is your definition of Dharma, and why does it light you up so much?
Yeah, so the word Dharma is an ancient Sanskrit word. So we all know Sanskrit is the oldest language in the world. And it loosely translates as meaning in life or purpose. But of course, it goes much more beyond that. And the reason it lights me up is because I've always had this understanding as a child even that there must be more to life. Yeah. There must be a greater meaning behind it all. You know, we're not just here to eat, drink and be merry, so to speak. There must be something. And so I was, a young girl when I first heard this word Dharma, and the way that I heard it was actually through the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu text. Yeah. And Krishna was coaching Arjun, and Arjun was on the battlefield and he was having to fight against his cousins and his siblings, and Lord Krishna was giving him advice and saying, in this moment when you're fighting, you're a warrior, you're a soldier, You're no longer in your bodily form. And he was saying, well, no, how can I, kill my own brothers? It's not ethical for me to do that. And this is where Krishna introduced the idea that actually this is your duty. So this is how a story that I heard when I was quite young. And then I was kind of pondering all my life on this idea of duty and purpose and meaning. And I really believe that each one of us has an individual purpose.
Well, listening to you talk about this word Dharma is making me light up. I can feel the passion exuding through the way that you're kind of sharing these stories. So one thing that you just said that I kind of lit up over was when you said, was it Krishna? Sorry, what?
Yeah.
It might not have been Krishna. When somebody was in this warrior state,
Yes.
they were no longer in their bodily form.
Yes.
And I find that really interesting because I think in a way, the way that I look at and understand our real purpose, it is kind of about transcending the day-to-day limitations of like the fragmentary world that we found ourselves living in and getting, I guess, inspired by or moved by something bigger. And is that kind of what you're talking about with that? You're no longer your bodily form, but you're moving with something much higher, maybe even like on a metaphysical level or something like that.
Yeah, so we all know that when we're in a state of flow, we lose ourselves.
Yes.
And so we completely lose track of time and, we get completely absorbed and immersed in the present moment. Yeah. And that's really, as you say, when we can transcend the physical realm,
yeah,
and start to tap into our higher self.
Yeah. Like for me, that's ultimately what it's all about, putting ourselves in that flow state. And the only way we can do that is literally, as you just said, by transcending our ideas about ourselves, aka the ego, so that we can align ourselves with wholeness instead of just fragmentation. So how do we do this? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, so the first thing is to understand that I am not limited to this body. And I think that's the biggest thing. And of course, to intellectually understand it is one thing, but to experience it is another. And that's why to experience it, we need modalities like yoga and meditation, because they provide us with tools to be able to tap into that higher self. And unfortunately, today, a lot of people are using yoga, but their ego is expanding as a result. And this is not supposed to happen. In fact, the ego is supposed to dissolve.
Yeah, that's my experience. And it's funny you use the word dissolve because normally I throw that out a million times a week when I'm talking about these things. Like, for me, the reason that I love yoga so much is exactly that. Like, it helped me to dissolve all of these limiting beliefs and perceptions and things like that, even if it's just for like a little moment, so that I could see who I really am and what I'm kind of really capable of. And it just allowed me to let go of all of that resistance that was stopping me from flowing so that I can kind of get to the state that you're talking about, which is putting ourselves in that state, to a great extent as much as possible. Is the Dharma though, is Dharma just being in that state, or is it more the kind of sense of the direction we need to move in or navigate that state towards, if that makes sense? Like,
So I mentioned earlier that I combine a lot of different things together, and one of the tools that I've studied is neuro-linguistic programming. And what I do is I use one of the models, which is called the neurological levels of change, and it's a pyramid, and it starts with environment at the bottom, it goes into your behaviors, towards your beliefs, identity, and then all the way up to the top, which is your purpose. And I use that model as a framework to guide people through the different stages of their lives. So you asked me, what exactly is Dharma? So in my opinion, Dharma is not one thing. It's an amalgamation of everything. So it's who we are on a physical level, on a mindful level, on an emotional level, and on a spiritual level. So it's all come together as a whole. And in order to do that, we need all of our preferences to be met. So, for example, on the environmental level, if we're not happy in the house we're living in, or if we're not happy with our partner or a job, we're not going to be able to move up the stages to find our true purpose. Because we're being held down by this almost materialistic world, or the belief that, oh no, I won't be able to change my job because I have to pay my bills, and all the things that are limiting us. But actually, in order to really tap into our purpose, we need to free ourselves from all of that.
Yeah, I love it. Like, ultimately, it seems like Dharma is what emerges, or it's the state that emerges when everything is aligned with our nature. Is that a good way to say it?
It's a perfect way of saying it. Yeah.
How does predeterminism come into this? So one thing that I read years ago, and I can't remember where, it basically said there's a difference between fate and destiny. Fate is ultimately the things that we can't change about our life as a whole, ultimately. The cards we've been dealt, let's say. Destiny is more about the choices that we make. And I suppose in the language that we're now using, bringing Dharma into it, it sounds like Dharma is accessible when we make choices that are aligned with our fate, something like that.
Yeah, so there's two things. There's karma and there's Dharma. And as you rightly said, Dharma is a state. It's not a particular thing that, people say, oh, that's my purpose. That would be very limiting. It's a whole state. It's a way of being.
Yes.
And our karma is the actions through which we have to go through in order to get to that state. So the fate and the destiny that you're talking about, that comes under karma. That's the actions that we have to go through.
Yeah.
And eventually the goal is for the two to align.
How are these actions determined, if that makes sense?
Well, in Hinduism, we believe that it's based on reincarnation. So anything that we have gone through in previous lives, we have to come back and we need to repay our debts, so to speak.
Right. So it is predetermined in a way. Like, ultimately, if we want to reach the state of Dharma, then there are going to be certain things that we have no choice about. And so part of the journey of moving towards Dharma is going through the process of acceptance, ultimately. Learning to accept what is meant for us and then acting in alignment with it. So,
yes, but that doesn't mean we don't have control, because we're still in a position to create good karma, and the good will outride the bad. So just like a bank account, if you put more money in, you'll get more interest. So in the same way, it's not like, I just have to sit back and there's nothing I can do. This is my karma. That's a very complacent attitude.
Yeah.
We're able to change our karma. We're able to dissolve it, going back to that word.
Okay. Can we dissolve it in this lifetime, though?
We can, of course, if we do a lot of good deeds and a lot of spiritual practices. Of course.
That's awesome.
In fact, for many of us, it's one of our last lifetimes, I believe.
Because I guess what I'm trying to do now, I'm trying to find the balance. So when I look at all this kind of life philosophy stuff that gets kind of propagated out there in the world, there's two main school of thoughts. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And it sounds like that's the path you're describing. On one side of it, we have people that are just so open-minded, their brains fall out ultimately, and they just surrender completely to what they think is the flow. Although I often think it's an extension of the ego and its needs. But anyway, they're just so open that they don't take any action. They think that things are going to just resolve themselves magically, let's say. Yeah. The other side of the coin is that people, they become complete human doings, and they end up forcing life completely neurotically through their need to make life conform to what they think they want, which is often not what they really want, because it's not aligned with Dharma in the language you're using. It's aligned with their desire to try and escape from all of the underlying emotional stuff that they haven't faced yet, something like that. And so on these two poles, there's all kinds of problems that arise, but it seems like what you're talking about is the balance between the two, which is obviously more aligned with reality and how it works. I don't know. Yeah,
exactly. It's about finding that balance, that state of harmony, that oneness. So we live in a world of duality. There's an opposite to everything, and we want to find that state of oneness, and that can only be experienced. That can't be intellectualized. And going back to the second group of people that you mentioned, those that are not ready to make a change, it's usually an external circumstance that has to happen in order for somebody to make a change. If everything is seemingly going well in life, there's no reason for them to want to do anything differently, because most people think that life is just to eat, drink and be merry, as I said at the beginning. And it's only when something hits them, like they get made redundant, or they go through a pregnancy, or they have a fertility issue, or something major happens in life that shakes them. And that's when they seek a more spiritual path.
Yeah. Like there has to be something that causes people to wake up in most cases.
Yeah.
But how do we help these people who maybe they haven't hit rock bottom yet, or something bad and external in the way that we're talking about hasn't or doesn't happen, but they're stuck in that state that you kind of alluded to at the start, where there's kind of an existential void and they just feel like there's something more to life, and they've got an itch that they can't scratch.
Yes, we can't, unfortunately, because everybody's got to go through their own karma. So no matter what we do, we could put a leaflet right in front of them for the most ideal place or workshop or coach. We could literally pick them up, take them there, drive them there, pay for their ticket. But if they're not ready, they will not do it.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yes,
yeah.
And it's frustrating being in that coach position, which I'm in as well, the same as you, where you see people and you know that you can help them, but they're not ready to be helped.
Yeah. Like I agree with you. Like I would never coach anybody who was not ready to be coached, because obviously they need to be coachable, as we say. And that just means that there's some stirring inside them already. Like the truth is awakening, and it's showing them that there's a gap between, the life that they've built for themselves ultimately, and the identity that they've picked up because of what they've been through, versus their realness, as I call it, like who they actually are and what is waiting to be expressed.
Yes.
Is there any... Sorry.
Yeah, all we can do for them is hold space.
Yeah, yeah. But is it inevitable, do you think, that something will happen then?
Yes, it has to. It has to happen.
Yeah, like there's a universal law kind of that what goes up must come down.
Yeah.
And the truth is always going to creep in eventually. And so it's true, like ultimately people, they only do change when they're ready for it, right? But a lot of the time, people get in all these complicated relationships and they make like life difficult for themselves because they're trying to change other people who can't be changed. So are you saying ultimately we just have to, I guess, accept people as they are, which makes sense. But what if somebody is in that state, I guess, where they're living life in the void, but they're not quite ready to wake up yet, but they're causing all kinds of, let's say, damage in relationships and things like that. How do we, I suppose, see that through the lens of our journey
this
towards
is where the understanding of karma comes in, that everybody has a role to play. So Shakespeare said, the world is a stage, we are all actors. And so if we understand that we're all actors, we can't all be heroes. There has to be villains. And so it may be that they have that role to play where they are causing damage, as you said right now. But then that's what they have to go through. And that's the karma that has to take place in order for them to then come out of that and purify. The ultimate goal is to purify the soul.
Like, I'm always talking about these kind of things in terms of it's either real or it's unreal. Real means that we're aligned with wholeness, ultimately, and unreal means that we're identifying with all kinds of different fragments in the way that I shared earlier. The whole point of the human experience, as far as I can tell, is that we're on a constant journey towards more wholeness. That's basically it, right? And things happen in our lives that are ultimately a process of spiritual purification, exactly like you just said. And one thing that I found really helpful is when I do meet difficult people or challenging people, I can normally kind of see it as a case of hurt people. Like, it's not the real version of them that is causing the damage and destruction. They're basically, they're just acting kind of on autopilot. But I suppose what I'm curious about now is like, how do we get that kind of equanimity around that? Like, I totally agree. Like, ultimately, all we can do is just let things be and focus on our own journey towards wholeness and purification. And if we do meet difficult people, we see it as a lesson. But I suppose, have you got any tips?
Cool. So there's a belief here that I hold that everyone is pure.
Yeah.
This is a really strong belief. And when I believe that everyone is pure, I don't look at people and think you're a bad person. You know, even criminals, everybody, if you think about it, once you remove that shadow, as you say, or those layers, we are all pure souls. And so when I hold space for somebody with my own purity, I invite them to experience theirs.
Yeah. So really all we can do is get into that place of wholeness as much as we possibly can, and then kind of lead from it, so to speak, or create a container.
Unknowingly inspire them.
Yeah. And then maybe the truth will stir, they'll wake up. Well, I find that in coaching sessions, like, ultimately, a coaching relationship gets its power from creating that container that allows the truth to shine through. Ultimately, it's not anything necessarily I do or say, it's just the space that you create. You bring reality into it, and then it allows people to be more real. My
favorite style of coaching is people-centered coaching, which is where you're just being present, you're being in the moment, and you're sharing that space with the client. And there's no objectives, there's no goals to set. You just are both open to whatever comes up in that moment.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah. It's being, like you were saying, and it's coming from that place of wholeness or purity or whatever we want to call it. I have got a question that has kind of been plaguing me for a while that I've kind of wanted to ask somebody who understands all these things. So I think you're going to be a good person to ask. I agree with you 100 billion% that everybody is pure, or everybody is real. Like, at the end of the day, we're all whole. We're all connected to wholeness at all times. But we get this kind of parasite in our minds that kind of stops us from seeing it. Like, the parasite is the ego, as I call it. It's our past conditioning, shame, guilt, and trauma that causes us to become split and fragmented within ourselves. And then it's almost like when we're in that state, even though we are whole or pure, we can't taste or experience that wholeness because there's like a layer over everything that we do. And I think in Hinduism, there's the veil of Maya or Maya. Yeah. Maybe the answer has something to do with that. But like, how do we come to terms with the fact that we live in two realities at all times, and one of them is just a pure illusion? And if you can step away from it, that's when you put yourself back in the flow, because you're aligning yourself with that wholeness, purity, etc.
Yeah, so it goes back to that realization that I am not this body and I am here for something bigger. And that's why the word Dharma, purpose, it's in Japanese, by the way, it's called ikigai, which is a really lovely word. And so this idea that I'm here to express my pure self in a bodily form. And until that realization happens, we will be in a state of Maya. We will be in ignorant bliss, as we call it. You know, it's almost like a veil is in front of our eyes and we're unable to see the truth. But it is usually, as I said, when an external circumstance happens or something happens that triggers that inner urge or wanting to know more.
Yeah. Once that urge gets triggered enough, can we speed up the process of freeing ourselves from the veil and, the ignorance of bliss, and often not bliss as well? Like, ignorance causes all kinds of friction and frustration. But anyway, can we speed up our, liberation from being in that state by actively starting to choose a purpose for ourselves, or trying to figure out what our purpose is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been studying spirituality for about 2 decades now, and I've seen people that have come to it in just recent years, and they've already accelerated and gone far in their journey. And so once they've got that realization, that knowing, that awakening, then the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah. How do we start to decide what our purpose might be? Like, I know we've talked about acceptance and like letting things swim up from, beneath the veil and things, but like, are there some practical steps already?
Yeah. So going back to the pyramid that I described, it's about going through each stage and making sure that each one aligns with our true nature. So we talked about environment, like, am I living in the most ideal place? A lot of people are compromising where they're living, for example, or during COVID, they realized that they didn't have enough outdoor space. If they were living in a flat, they would have preferred a house. So it's like the physical place that I'm living, the town that I'm living in, the country I'm living in, does that serve me? And then looking at your job, does your job serve you? Am I doing something that I love doing? And then looking at all the other parts of your life. Am I doing the hobbies that I love doing? I recently realized that I love swimming, but I never go swimming. And I was like, why do I never go swimming? Like, it baffled me. And then I realized that actually, if I make an effort to go, I'll actually be a happier person. And so making those simple lifestyle changes to meet our preferences. So that's step one. And then we move up towards understanding our behaviors, our actions, and not just the conscious ones, the subconscious ones, as we know, are equally as important, if not more. And then, of course, our beliefs, making sure that we have more empowering beliefs than limiting beliefs. And it's only when all of that aligns, that's when we really tap into this identity. Who am I? That's the big question. And this can't be intellectually answered. No matter how much you read or write or speak, you're never going to be able to get the answer. It has to be experienced.
Yeah. So I have another million questions now after what you just shared. So there's 2 things there that you said that I find really interesting. The first one is that you've basically said that really moving towards our Dharma is just about making these small changes and small choices. I think a lot of the time when people think about changing or improving their lives, they think they need to make some massive dramatic changes that, where it's the kind of thing where nothing's ever going to be the same ever again because it's so gargantuan. But actually, it is just those little choices, because real life is a process, and day by day, the little choices that we do make, like going swimming or whatever, doing yoga, like they're the things that are just going to keep building on themselves in increments until our life becomes more and more real. So, yeah. So is it anything?
It's also not to say that we're going to, like, we're always evolving as well. So
yeah.
It's important to recognize that perhaps 5 years ago, I didn't want to go swimming and now I do. So it's like always adapting to what we are really wanting inside. And many of us have beliefs around that, and we're like, oh no, I can't do that because of this.
Yeah.
There's always excuses. And actually it's about making your life, it's almost like you're designing it according to your very core nature.
Yeah. Like ultimately, I think that's the best way to do it. Start diving into that nature a little bit, and then designing a lifestyle that is going to allow that to keep expanding and evolving. But also, like you said, to periodically reflect on the progress you are making and see what's changed, because we do evolve. Like I've noticed this with my workouts. Like at the minute, like last 2 years, I've been doing yoga every single day, basically. But maybe like 2 years ago, I was doing like weights and I was mixing things up and so on and so forth. But then I I kind of realized I was only doing that because I identified with doing it, if that makes sense. And so I needed to mix it up. And so I love this thing you've shared about, constantly reflecting, because ultimately we start identifying with our habits, and then eventually, reality changes, we evolve, and we need to reboot almost.
So many people go to the gym just because they think they should, but maybe they would enjoy playing squash more or tennis, or, they just haven't given themselves that opportunity to explore.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about. It's like, who am I? What do I want? Do most people even know their favorite color? If I ask the listeners, what is your favorite color? Would they be able to answer straight away? Or would they say, well, I sometimes like purple, or sometimes...
Yeah.
They don't know themselves. And that's where the gap is. We need to do more personal development. We're always studying the world around us, other people. We study animals, we study subjects. How often do we turn inwards and study ourselves?
Yeah. And the other thing there is that throughout the course of our lifetimes, there's going to be so many different versions. And so we do have to just keep chipping away ultimately to see what's changed and what hasn't. I'm going to segue a little bit. Another question that I had based on what you were just saying about, going through the triangle and like looking at the things that we really want and our ideals and all that stuff. How do we know the difference between what we really, really want, like in our purity, let's say, in our wholeness, versus what we think we want because of our ego and our conditioning? Because this is something that I've seen a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of. They set a goal for themselves, or they set a vision for themselves, but they're only really doing it to compensate for underlying feelings of shame and whatever else is going on inside them. And as they move towards that, they think it's their ideal, but actually it just ends up being something that exacerbates the problems they've got in their lives, because it's causing them to run away from the truth instead of running towards it. So is there anything there in your philosophy?
Yeah, so there's two very different things. So the ego, as you say, which is made up of the logical mind, and the logical mind will always tell us things that we should do, and not necessarily what's good for us, but just what makes practical sense. And then there's the intuitive mind, and that's coming from the third eye. That's our higher self. And so it is a challenge sometimes to be able to differentiate the two. But that's why the practice of yoga and meditation is so important. And I have a third eye meditation actually, which is available. And I really strongly encourage people to practice that on a daily basis. The more you open your third eye chakra, the more you start to unlock your intuition. And some people think only special people have these psychic abilities, and we all have it. We just haven't tapped into it. And when we do, that's when we start to understand what we really want. All of the decisions I've made in my life, professionally and personally, have come from my intuition. I wouldn't trust my logical mind.
Like, you need your logical mind to kind of weigh things up and reason and so on and all that. But ultimately, it's always from the past. All of the premises that your logical mind is kind of fueled by are just old, outdated thinking. And so they're fragmentary in the language I use, and they hold us back from the whole if we attach to them too much. Where is this meditation that you mentioned? Is it on your website or something?
It is, yeah. It's a free guided meditation, and I encourage people to download it and look into it on a regular basis, because it really starts to create synchronicities in life. You start to understand things more. But again, then the ego can get involved there and be like, oh, look, I'm sensing things before they happen. I knew the bell was going to ring before it rang.
I'm so enlightened.
I'm so enlightened, yeah. And that's where, again, we've got to work hard to make sure we dissolve that.
Yeah. Like, it's like we have to constantly be dissolving things. Like, constantly. Even if we do, like, say I wake up tomorrow morning and I become, like, really enlightened because I've opened my third eye and stuff, and I reach my Dharma, or feel that state of Dharma, like I'm flowing with it. If I get too attached to that, then the next day is going to be gone.
Yes.
Because there's something we need to dissolve. So where do those waves keep coming from? Is it just because we're in bodies? Something like that?
It is, and it could be our karma as well. So sometimes I deliver a workshop and I'm completely in a state of flow, and I know that it's almost like it's not me doing it. It's as if I'm being channeled.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I will take credit for people that write to me and say they had a transformative experience. And that's not me. That's my ego wanting to take credit.
Yeah. Like, I know what you mean. Like, I try and maintain that perspective in my coaching sessions, because if someone gets results, it's not anything I've done. Like, first of all, they've done the work, but what I mean is, in the context of the coaching conversations, when they're getting insights and things like that, it's like we were saying earlier, all we've done is introduce the truth, and the truth just does things by itself. Like, it's nothing to do with us, really. It's just creating those conditions for it to happen. And I think taking ourselves out of the equation is almost always the way forward. That seems to be the main theme of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So when I did my coaching training, my teacher said to me that I should cease to exist. Yes. Completely getting rid of this sense of self. And it's almost becoming a medium. And I guess that's what Dharma is. If we're going to wrap up what is the idea of Dharma, it's becoming a medium for the higher power to flow through you. So, some people would say I'm doing God's work on earth. It's the same kind of thing. I'm performing duties which are aligned with my higher self. Now, that doesn't have to be anything momentous. You don't have to be a prime minister or write a book or anything. Even the most simplest of jobs, if they're done with pure sincerity and duty, that is Dharma. So it's not really the job itself. It's more like the attitude and approach to the job. Yeah.
It's not what you do, it's how you do it. That's why I love yoga, because that's what it taught me. What are some other things, like simple practices that people can do to start figuring that out for themselves? So, like, I remember last time we spoke, we were talking about the idea of take your yoga off the mat. Yoga basically has shown me, like, how to show up in life ultimately, by just giving me a space to practice it. And then when I am not doing yoga, I can still kind of remember those lessons and try to show up in that way. You mentioned meditation. I suppose, just to wrap this up, are there like other simple things?
I mentioned earlier that I'm a Reiki healer, and I really believe in energy, and energetic fields are all around us. And one thing I would ask listeners to become aware of is their own personal energy. So whether you know it or not, people can read your energy. Maybe not consciously, but they can get a sense of what's going on for you. So if you're going through things in your life, it's showing on your face. If you're going through, if you're overthinking or worrying or analyzing, that's all coming across in your body language and in your energetic fields. So I would encourage people to clear that on a daily basis. And there are many ways that you can clear that. Meditation is one of them. Sage is another way. Having a Reiki or any kind of energy healing treatment is another way. But just to start becoming more aware of what energy am I projecting? Am I, if not many people want to hang around with you, it's probably because they're picking up on something to do with your energy. So that's one thing that I'd really encourage people to become aware of.
That's amazing. So ultimately just monitoring, I guess, our vibe, let's say, like how we're showing up, how we feel, how much friction we're carrying inside ourselves. All
that doesn't mean to say we have to be happy all the time or need to put on a fake persona, but it just means start to really think about actually, how am I showing up?
Yeah. Being real. Ultimately. So we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. Like, that was awesome. If you could sum this up, how would you do it? And can you let people know what your website is?
Yeah, so I think there's so many coaches out there claiming to be able to help people to reveal their life purpose. And I think what the biggest message that I want to get across is your life purpose is not one thing. It's not like you're going to do a series of coaching sessions or go to workshops and come away with one sentence and be like, that's it, that's my purpose. That's very limiting to think that way. Purpose is your whole existence, the whole reason that you're here on earth. And that is what Dharma is. It's a state of being. And you can tap into that state at any time. There's probably areas of your life where you're already completely aligned. And so the goal is to just align all of the areas, because you have a choice. You don't have to live the way that you live. You don't have to be unhappy. You have a choice. So that's the biggest thing.
I love what you just said. Like, your purpose is your whole existence. Boom. And what's your website again? And social media stuff?
So it's journeywithnikita.com, and I do have Instagram, Facebook, Journey with Nikita. I do a range of workshops, retreats, online courses as well. I mentioned I have free guided meditations on my website, and every month I have a free meditation masterclass as well. So I'd love to invite listeners to join me for a live meditation class.
Amazing. I'll share all your links in the show notes. But Nikita, thank you so much for this. It's been, it's really been just very edifying. So thank you so much for your time and energy and all that stuff. Definitely living your Dharma right now.
Thank you.